Every farm has a story. When it comes to dairy farming, these stories are often only heard by the animals raised, the land stewarded, and the family that makes it all possible. Join me, Dairy Gal Val, as I interview individuals from across the dairy industry, both within the United States and across the globe, discussing topics like farm management, the food industry, ag business and technology, and most importantly, their farm story. This is the Dairy Hour Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Dairy Hour Podcast. I am your host, Dairy Gal Val, or Val Levine. This episode is brought to you by Zysk app. Zysk is a free app that helps you accurately predict your dairy's financial future. This tool allows you to enter your farm information into it and uses multiple algorithms to help calculate profitability for the next 12 months. ZyskApp.com, or check them out on Instagram and Facebook. They're really great people over there, and if you have any questions, I'm sure they would love to help you out. I am joined today by the one and only Ruth Grice. Ruth, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Val. Great to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to chat with you. This is a common theme on the podcast lately. Another one of those great individuals that I was able to meet at the World Dairy Summit in Chicago. So it was a pleasure to get to meet her, get to chat a little bit about her operation in Great Britain. And Ruth, if you want to kind of say a little bit about what you have going on over there, that would be super.
Sure. So, yeah, thank you for the introduction. I am a dairy farmer based in a county called Leicestershire. We farm around 8 miles from a small market town called Melton Mowbray. And roughly speaking, if you were in London, you would drive northwards for about 3 hours and then you'd hit our farm. We milk 180 pedigree Holsteins, and I farm in partnership with my mum and dad. And our milk goes to make the world famous Stilton cheese, which is made by a co-op called Long Clawson Dairy. So the cooperative is owned by 33 fellow farmers, us being one of them, and we're all based 30 miles of the dairy where our milk gets sent. On the dairy farm, we calve all year round. We are a closed herd, so we have bred all of our own cows for the past 30 years. And because we are on a cheese contract, we're breeding for the fats and the proteins, so the solids within our milk, as well as all the usual, fertility rates and breeding a really good, healthy cow. We also farm 110 hectares, that's around 300 odd acres. Predominantly it's down to grass for the vast majority of the fields, and then we want to break that rotation. We are growing winter wheats, winter barley, and maize, your corn, and all of that forage goes into our winter animal feed. We ferment all of it into silage. And then, as well as working on the dairy farm, I also work for the co-op 4 days a week.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do for your job at the co-op?
Sure. So I'm still pretty new to it. I started working for them 6 months ago, started in June 2023, and I am their farm liaison and sustainability manager. So I work alongside another colleague on general farm liaison matters, whether that is, working with our farmers, supporting them on milk quality issues, health and welfare of animals, sharing best practice, bringing our farmers together 4 times a year. And on the sustainability front, it's leading on delivering our sustainability agenda on farm. So the whole of the co-op has got a CSR, a corporate social responsibility strategy. The farms feed into that as much as the factory where the cheese is made does. And on farm, it's all about reducing our carbon emissions through our fuel use, fertilizer use, fertility rates, and feed usage. as well as maintaining and increasing biodiversity on farm, looking after our water sources, and also capturing those fantastic stories from around the 33 farms as to how they feed into their local economy, local communities, whether that's through employment opportunities, through school trips, apprenticeships, working with local vet students, whatever it might be that connects our farms to where they live and where they operate from.
That's really great that your co-op is taking strides to make sure that they're helping their farms basically propel into the future with sustainability. Are they looking at any requirements for different sustainable practices, or is it basically just a volunteer type basis for these farms to basically be, do the different projects for sustainability at their own pace, or are you encouraging them to go, at a faster pace? How is that in England?
That's a really good question. So a lot of the drive behind the sustainability agenda at Long Clawson Dairy is coming from our customers. So the vast majority of cheese that's made within the co-op is sold to the UK domestic markets, to major supermarkets, and we sell cheese either directly or indirectly to all UK retailers, with the exception of one, Asda, which used to be owned by Walmart. And there are, like, many organizations around the world. They're very, very keen to contribute where they can to climate targets, one large one being, of course, reduction of carbon emissions. So that's sitting behind a lot of what we're doing. But I would say, as a co-op, we are at the start of our journey, and where I'm at now with our farmers and on our own farm, it's very much capturing where we're at. So the Long Clawson Dairy carbon story started 3 years ago, when we started capturing data from farm to calculate what our carbon emissions are by farm and then as a collective. And we've now got 3 years worth of that data, and we know that as an average, our farm has an emissions intensity of 1.08 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent for every kilogram of fat and protein corrected milk produced, which, just to set that against a UK average, is below the UK average. That's about 1.25 kilograms of carbon equivalent. So that feels like a really good place to be starting from, but we don't want to get complacent. So because we are the size we are, we're just 33 farmers, we have got the luxury of being able to work with each and every one of our farmers to support, work alongside them to reduce those carbon emissions, to increase the biodiversity, the water stewardship, the community. But I can't do that in my role at the dairy without knowing where our farms are. So I'm literally halfway through in December 2023 of going around each and every farm, sitting down with them with a cup of tea around their kitchen table, looking through all of their carbon stats and just being in listening mode and finding those stories. So what sits behind all that data? Why is one figure that and the other figures such and such? And then it's at this stage purely by just being, in listening mode, not judging our farmers as to what they're doing, because there's always, often good reasons as to why people farm in the way they do. That in itself has just been the most fantastic process to go through, and feel very privileged to have heard some of the stories that have come out. Our farmers, like farmers, in the US, they love the land they farm, whether or not they have inherited it from generations before, or whether they are first generation farmers. They want to do right by the land. They want to do right by their animals. They're part of their families. I haven't sat down with anyone where I think, oh my goodness, I'm not quite sure about this practice. That's really going to deplete your soil health, or that's probably not going to help the longevity of your cows. So I'm sure in time, going back to your question, there will come a point where we're sitting down as a collective of farmers and trying to unpick, okay, we've done all that low-hanging fruit. How do we continue to lower that carbon emissions intensity? What's next? What else can we do? But I think at this point in time, it's capturing those stories and hearing what people are already doing, what's already in their operational plans. So, for example, we have a few farmers who are going soya free with their feed blends. And for us in the UK, we don't grow soya in the UK. There might be the odd farmer that's able to crack that nut, but it's just not a crop that succeeds very well in our climate. So we ship it from North and South America. And if it's grown on non-deforested, non-converted land sources, which is how all of our farms in the cooperative get their soya from, that's great on the one hand, but it's still coming from all the way from North and South America. So some of our farmers are looking at UK grown alternatives, whether that's rapeseed meal or UK beans and pulses. Or it might be that one of our farms has a few have just installed solar panels or wind turbines on their farm, so they're generating their own renewable energy sources. And on the cow health side, obviously the healthier that our cows are, the longer they live, the lower our replacement rate is, and the lower that carbon emissions is. So just hearing stories as to what our farmers are doing to make sure that their calves have the best start they possibly can do on their farm, the attention to detail in that calf shed, so those calves are growing at a really, really good rate, that they're having their first calf at around 24, 25, 26 months. And then throughout her life within the milking herds, just making sure that she has a really, really high welfare approach to her management. So, we're looking at lameness on a regular basis, mastitis, vaccinations against diseases, just so that she can have, a long, healthy, fruitful life, and we're not having to replace her due to ill health at a stage in life where we'd rather she still be with us.
Yes.
And yeah, it's been like I say, it's been a huge privilege hearing those stories and capturing them, and working with our farmers to have plans in place to reduce those emissions.
Definitely. And it is definitely a task to be able to find, because in order to say, hey, we've improved on the scale of sustainability, you have to have those numbers that say, well, here's where we are now, here's where we started. So if you don't have those here's where we started numbers, which I think is a little bit of what the United States has somewhat run into, like it's hard to get a really good judgment of where we're at now based on where we were, because you don't really have, we've been starting to do things that make us more sustainable for many years now, but you don't have that like actual, back before sustainability was a buzzword. Farmers have been sustainability before, or farmers have been sustainable since before sustainability was a word. So going back and trying to establish that baseline is so important. And that's a great also way to, for you, Ruth, to sit down and get to know the farmers that you're going to be working with over the next however many years during this sustainability process, because it definitely makes it's easier to get things accomplished and have people trust you and listen to your ideas and opinions when they know you and have sat down and, had that cup of tea with you, relaxed, basically establish those baselines. So that is so important going forward in your relationship, for that sustainability journey, at least for your cooperative.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
So that's really great. So I want to back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about your family's dairy farm, and growing up on the dairy farm, and all of those fun little things. So like, how long are your parents first generation? How many generations has it been? If you want to talk a little bit about growing up on the farm.
Sure. So my grandfather and my great grandfather bought this actual farm back in 1952. But a few years ago, we delved into the family history and tracked our way back through my father's family. to the late 1700s, and I couldn't find records beyond that, but essentially we've moved 3 villages around 5 miles in that time as a family. So we haven't gone far. We're sort of mixed farming back in the 50s, which is, you know, very typical for most farms in the UK. And then as time progressed, specialised into dairy farming again, which is very typical over here, as I'm sure it is over in America as well. So growing on the farm was fantastic, actually. And I think it's one of those things that you don't really realise how fortunate we were until, you know, maybe you get to the age I am now and look back and think, wow, that was actually pretty cool that I could just, you know, go off into the fields at a weekend on a summer's day and explore, and come back a few hours later and it was completely perfectly normal to be able to do that and to have that freedom. Definitely took that for granted. But yeah, it was great. I grew up with my 2 sisters. My grandparents, both sets of grandparents, lived within a mile. So my dad's parents lived just next door where my parents now live. And my mum's parents were in the village a mile away. We're small family, but very, very close knit. And it was quite nice, actually. My dad's family are all from farming, but my mum's family are from a nearby city called Nottingham. And it's been nice having that mix, actually, because you just see things through different lenses with different backgrounds, that urban, rural, you know, way of looking at things. And I think that's added a nice flavor, if you like, to our business today. But growing up, didn't really ever imagine working in the industry. Just didn't really, like, if you flick through the industry publications that we get now here, so we have 2 major farming magazines, the Farmers Weekly and the Farmers Guardian, and if you flick through them today, you see lots and lots of different faces in there, men and women farmers. Whereas when I was growing up, it was just, you know, lots of men, lots of tractors. There just weren't jobs like there are now for women in farming. It was, you know, very, very labor intensive. So I went off to university when I was 18. I went to Sheffield, which is about an hour's north, quite an industrial city. Wanted something completely different from being out in the middle of nowhere, just to see how life felt in a very, very industrial city. And then after I graduated, I went into the world of the environmental NGO. So I worked for 4 environmental NGOs over the period of 17 years. And during that time, in my late 20s, I also did an MBA part-time at the Royal Agricultural University, which is at Cirencester, which is in Wiltshire, further down south. And I had itchy feet at that time, thinking I might want to explore options within the ag sector, but I wasn't completely sure whether or not it was for me. And I thought, well, if I did this course, then, you know, it's a master's degree. If I don't enjoy the agricultural side of it, I've still got an MBA, and I can use that in whatever way I want to with my career. But as you probably guessed, I ended up really enjoying the agricultural side of it, and found this world of agriculture just, you know, brilliant, really, really welcoming, really diverse in terms of the opportunities that were available, and frankly quite different to how I remember or perceived farming or the ag sector to be when I was maybe 17, 18 years old, deciding what I wanted to do at university. So after I finished my MBA, I did that very part-time, 1 day a week studying for, my gosh, 5 or 6 years. And then after that, I replaced my 1 day a week at university with 1 day a week working on the family farm. And I've been working here on that basis ever since. Combine working in the environmental NGO sector with working on the family farm, and now obviously working for the dairy co-op with working here.
So how many years have you been back on the farm?
So working, I think just past 6 years.
Okay.
So started off on the payroll, and now I'm a partner in the family business. And yeah, I try and get stuck in with whatever I can. So there's the official day a week where I will start my days helping the staff team finish off in the milking parlour, and then tomorrow it's my farm day tomorrow, so I'll be starting off with that, and then our vet's coming for his bi-weekly visits to do pregnancy diagnosis with a select number of cows and fertility treatments on others, and then the afternoons can be whatever else needs doing, whether that is admin work, bookkeeping, other bits of paperwork, whatever falls my way, and then help my dad with the night checks when I'm able to, and do milkings if there's an odd slot that needs filling on the milking rota at weekends. Yeah, getting stuck in wherever I can.
Yes, doing farmer things.
Yeah.
Filling in, doing whatever needs to be done. That's people are like, well, don't you have like a schedule? And I was like, no. It's like something happens, it changes. And that's the one thing that sometimes I do have a hard time with farming is just I like to be scheduled. When things go off schedule, it gets me so bad sometimes. And I'm just like, I should know better. I've like been born and raised in this. I should be used to it. But here's the thing. I am not. I'm very much a list, like organized person. This has to go this way. This is going to take this much time. Yeah. So I
hear you.
I feel that. And, you know, as like more of a manager than like a day-to-day laborer in our farm, I completely get that. It's just like whatever needs to be done. Like, oh, it's tax season. I need to do my taxes, or, oh, I need to take care of this, or, oh, there's a problem. I need to go troubleshoot this, or it's never a dull moment. And I guess I am happier. Like, I guess I don't think that I'd want to sit down and do the same exact thing like monotonously all the time. So it does keep that out of it, but I do like to be able to plan ahead. And sometimes that's not really the easiest thing to do as a farmer. So I get that. But we're happy to have you back in the dairy industry. And, you know, it is funny when you go away from the family farm like you did when you went to college. And, you know, when you are, you know, in that 17, 18, 19-year-old stage, you're like, man, there's got to be something better out there, because all you can think about is the farm and how, you know, maybe it was a little bit of an inconvenience to you when you were growing up. Whereas, you know, let's face it, in today's day and age, you know, there's not as nearly as many farm families, you know, even at your local school as there was. So you see the other kids that are not tied down by the farm at home. And it is definitely one of those things where you're like, oh, I can't wait to get away and like be able to just have that consistency and not have everything be about the farm. But then you get older and you're like, oh, I don't think that I would have wanted to grow up the other way. So I'm good with this. Like, I'm happy I was raised on a farm. I completely get that, even though I never thought that I was ever going to leave ag. I just was never sure, you know, whether I was going to be here on the dairy farm or doing something else. But yeah, I completely understand that thought. Like, there's got to be something, you know, something better, as they say, out there. The grass is greener on the other side, but that's not always the case.
No, I remember always, sometimes I still feel it, like I've got friends who don't live in the UK anymore for lots of different reasons, and sometimes I think, God, I wonder what that must feel like to go and do that. But now as I've got older, I'm like, you know what, so I get really homesick when I go away, and it's really annoying, but I really miss the cows and I miss the family. But if I think to myself, like, imagine what it would be like if like mum and dad weren't in a job, a career where the land that they're tied to the land in an emotional sense, not just in a physical sense. What would that feel like? But I think I would, it's part of who you are, isn't it? It's part of your DNA. And yeah, I think I'd really miss it if that wasn't there.
100%. I completely agree with that statement. I love to travel and I love to go out and do different things, but I do love to come home also. And I do look forward to sometimes just getting that quiet time in the barn with the cows. Just, it's so relaxing. And
Yeah.
it's just, there's something about being around them that's just, it's medicine for the soul, right?
Oh, my favorite part of the day is doing night checks, especially if work's been busy. And yeah, I am yet to put it into words, but my favorite shed to go into is our dry cows. And they're all lying down at this stage of the day, chewing their cuds in their groups. And it's almost like, they welcome you into the shed as you walk around and just check everyone's okay. They don't move, they're okay. They don't mind you scratching their head a little bit. It's lovely.
Yeah, definitely. I just walked through our, which we have like a facing, the two groups face each other and you can walk down the center aisle where they're all eating.
Mm.
And we were walking through and all the cows are like looking up like, hey, how are you?
Oh, it's lovely.
And she goes, yeah, they really live a tough life and don't like you. I was like, yep, that's why they're all like fighting for my attention and like, hey, how are you? Like, what's going on? So it's funny. And I love just standing up there and listening and watching them eat is just, it's
Yeah.
something, it's so peaceful. It's amazing. I love it. That's my favorite spot to be, just sitting there and just watching them do their thing, relaxing in their happy habitat and
Yeah.
living their best lives, as I say.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So did you grow up with any brothers or sisters, or are you an only child?
Two sisters. So my older sister does work in the sector. She works for the National Farmers Union. My younger sister, no, she doesn't work in the sector. She doesn't even live near the farm either. She's a couple of hours away. So yeah,
Okay.
one of each.
So there was no other sibling that you had that was on the farm when you weren't on the farm. It was just mom and dad,
Yeah, and
basically at that
we
point.
have a staff team, but yeah,
Well,
just mom
yeah,
and
that's
dad.
what I meant.
Yeah,
As far as
yeah.
family goes, it was just your mom and dad. There was no siblings that you had to kind of, you know, battle back into the business or anything like that.
No, do you know, I've never thought of that, but no, like I said, we are a very close-knit family, and I wonder, if there were more of just me than that were working directly on the farm. I'd like to think that would be okay. I think we'd adapt, and when I first started working in the partnership, I was concerned about what can I contribute. I can't drive a tractor, and I can't do a lot of the tasks that dad and the staff team can do, but I think you find your niche.
Yes.
And for me, this sounds really boring, but I love it. I love my cow data, and I love, this evening I'll be getting the list ready for our vet visits and downloading all the information from our computer program and checking that that's all correct, doing the milking rotas and other bits and bobs. And yeah, each task might seem very menial, but it all adds up. It all plays a
Yeah.
role in the business functioning, and I enjoy those things. And it's not that I'm the only person that can do it, but that's where I can add my value. And I think if my sisters were to join the business, they would bring skills and ideas and ways of doing things to the table that I can't do, my mum and dad can't do, because they're not us. They're different people with different thoughts. And yeah, I like the fact that I think as a family we do we have a culture of welcoming that diversity.
Good. That's a very good family culture to have, because I know that some people are not, unfortunately, that lucky to have those. So that's really, really good that you had that opportunity and have that family culture where you're comfortable with the way that things go.
Yeah.
So now I want to switch gears and I want to talk cheese, because I think we mentioned earlier on the episode that you have a fantastic cheese that comes out of your milk cooperative. So I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and maybe, talk a little bit more about the cooperative, the different things that they do.
Sure. So we were set up as a cooperative back in 1912. And it was set up by a very small number of farmers who all lived in the village where the dairy is, Long Clawson, and a neighbouring village not too far away. And the group of farmers used to sell their milk on a daily basis to Nottingham as liquid milk for people who lived in the city. And the story goes that it wasn't a guaranteed market. So the farmers would take their milk to the nearest train station, and sometimes the milk would be collected and bought, and other times they'd get there and they'd say, actually, we don't need your milk today. Thank you, but no thank you. During all of this, the farmers' wives are all making blue cheese independently back at home. And I think as a group, they got so fed up of having such an unreliable market for their milk that they clubbed together. They created the cheese cooperative. They worked out which farm made the best blue cheese, and they went with that recipe and developed the dairy from that point onwards. And there are still people who supply the dairy today who are related to people who started the dairy all the way back in 1912.
That's amazing.
It is, isn't it? It's really, really nice story. So we are famous for making the blue Stilton, and that has a PDO designation on it in the same way that champagne does in France. So you can only make blue Stilton in 3 counties, or the milk has got to come from 3 counties in England. So that's Leicestershire, where we're based and where the dairy's based, Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. So the 33 farms that are currently supplying Long Clawson dairy are all in Leicestershire or Nottinghamshire, majority in Leicestershire itself. And we make the blue Stilton, but we also make a range of other cheeses as well. So the blue Stilton's made with our milk, as is another cheese called Shropshire Blue, and then white Stilton, which is Stilton without the blue veining in it. We also make a traditional red Leicester cheese, which I did find when I was in Milwaukee back in October, and that's called Rutland Red.
Oh my gosh, I have to pause there for a second. So I just did a podcast recently with Gabby Emery.
Okay.
And so my mom had found me a cheese advent calendar, and I believe that a lot of them are European cheeses, and actually she got it from an Aldi, so I'm pretty sure that they're all Aldi cheeses, or
okay,
they're all European cheeses, excuse me. So from the recording of this podcast, which back in December, so it was a red, how did you say the L word?
Rutland Red.
No, the L word.
Oh, Red Leicester. Red Leicester?
Yes. So I was talking about it on my Instagram stories. I was talking about the type of cheese, and it was a red Leicester.
Yeah, red Leicester. Yeah.
And it does not look the way that it's pronounced. And I said something in my stories, and Gabby messaged me and was laughing hysterically and told me